Hey guys, it's Chrissy here with Anchor Light Psychology. Welcome back. You might be thinking to yourself, doesn't she usually post every Saturday? Why, yes, I usually do. However, some things did come up, and the past few days have been a little rough. So I'm posting a couple days late. Today is Monday, January 5th, 2026. So I'm just getting around to it now. And I just wanted to thank you guys for your patience and your understanding. Today's topic is actually about closure, something almost all of us crave, whether we like it or not. Closure is often treated mm, like a finish line, like something when you reach it, everything suddenly makes sense and just stops hurting. But the truth is, closure is actually psychological, emotional, and neurological. It is not situational. This episode is about why your brain wants the closure so badly and why unresolved experiences can stay alive for years, and what actually helps when the apology, the explanation, or the ending you hoped for never actually comes. Many of us were told to just let it go without anyone ever explaining why it felt nearly impossible to do that. Now, I have my favorite part, of course, our first psychology nugget: why the brain hates unfinished stories. Here's something fascinating about the brain: your brain is wired to complete loops. When something ends without explanation, say a relationship, abandonment, rejection, a betrayal, your mind keeps returning to it. Not because you're weak, not because you're being dramatic, but because unfinished emotional experiences stay active in the brain. Psychology calls this, and pardon me if I say this wrong, the Zeigarnik effect or Zeigarnik effect. It is spelled Zeigarnik. And this is the tendency for the brain to remember incomplete or interrupted experiences more vividly than completed ones. Emotionally unresolved events function the same way. Your brain keeps asking, what happened? Why did this happen? What did I miss? What does this say about me? That mental replay is not obsession. It is your nervous system searching for safety through understanding. There's an experience from my childhood that really helped me understand how unresolved moments like that stay alive in the brain. When I was in elementary school, there was a group of girls who were not kind to me at all. They were cruel, and it went on for years. And what's interesting is that nothing, no dramatic moment happened at the end. There was no confrontation with explanation, no moment where things were sat and talked through. It was just something that happened and then it ended. But emotionally, for me, it didn't end. I carried the feelings from that experience into my teenage years, and it reflected. I even carried it into my early 20s. Not because I wanted to relive that experience, but because there was never a moment where it made sense to me. And my brain was really hanging on to that and looking for answers. There was no understanding, no accountability, just no closure. And what I realize now is that it wasn't the behavior itself that stayed with me for all those years. It was the unanswered question of why? Why did that happen? Why did they do that to me? What's wrong with me? I I ended up seeing myself differently. I started looking inward, questioning myself with things like, what's wrong with me? Why would a group of people want to do those things to me for that long? What did I ever do to deserve that? And not just that, I also lacked trust after that. And I had already had some pretty intense experiences prior to these couple things I'm sharing with you now and about to share with you. But I really lacked trust in anyone after that. I had trouble making friends. I didn't want to make friends. I didn't trust anyone. My relationships were just done after that. They were just crap. Once I understood that my brain wasn't being dramatic, but it was actually trying to protect me by actually making sense of something unresolved, I was finally able to let that experience rest. Now, we have psychology nugget number 2, which is the myth of external closure. Many of us grow up believing closure comes from other people. If they just explained, if they just apologized, if they finally acknowledged the harm they did. But here's the truth that most people don't realize until much later. External closure is unreliable. Sometimes the person denies your experience. Sometimes they minimize it. Sometimes they are incapable of empathy. Sometimes they never return at all. When healing is tied to someone else's response, we remain emotionally attached to someone who may never change. I experienced this need for closure in a much deeper way later in my life. My oldest child's father left when I was pregnant and never came back. There was no explanation, there was no conversation, no accountability, just absence. Years later, when our son was about 11 years old, he reappeared. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment I finally get the answers I've always wanted. This is where everything is going to make sense. But instead, what showed up was anything but closure. Ended up finding out he was struggling with addiction. He caused harm to us, and then he disappeared again. And this time it was for good. And that was a painful realization because I had unknowingly placed my healing in the hands of someone who wasn't capable of giving it. There was a moment where he was talking to me and I realized he's talking through me and only for himself. It was just like a moment of clarity. And what ultimately brought peace for me wasn't an apology or an explanation. It was recognizing that his absence, his behavior, and his choices already told me everything I needed to know. That's when I stopped waiting for closure and started giving it to myself. That's the moment I learned something very important. Closure doesn't always come from the person who caused the wound. Sometimes it comes from the clarity we allow ourselves to accept. Psychology nugget number 3. Why waiting for closure can keep you stuck. Sometimes the reason is the answer. Sometimes the lack of explanation is the explanation. When someone repeatedly avoids responsibility, avoids accountability, or repair, their behavior itself becomes information. Closure doesn't always come as words, sometimes it comes as clarity. If you're listening and you're thinking of someone you're still waiting on, someone you hoped would explain, someone you hoped would apologize or make things right, notice what that waiting has cost you. Not with judgment, just with honesty. What finally brought peace for me wasn't a conversation. It wasn't. It was internal closure. I realized I didn't need permission to move on. I didn't need validation for my pain. I didn't need an apology to make my experience real. Real closure happened when I allowed myself to say, this hurt. It mattered. And I get to decide what happens next. Here's my final psychology nugget for this episode. The brain can create its own ending. Your brain doesn't need their version of the story. It needs meaning, safety, and self trust. When you provide that internally, your nervous system finally stands down. Not because the past didn't matter, but because it no longer controls the present. If you're carrying something unresolved, something that never got the ending you hoped for, I want you to know this. You are not broken. You're human. And sometimes healing isn't about getting answers. It's about deciding you're done asking the question. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope that somebody found this healing and helpful. And if you have any questions or you want a conversation, want me to elaborate on anything, or you have a topic suggestion, anything, feel free to reach out to me. You can shoot me a message and you can also leave a comment. There are a few people who reach out to me with questions and are going through similar things. So feel free to spark up a conversation as well. And I just want to thank you again for your patience waiting for this episode to come. And just wish you all a good night, a good morning, a good afternoon, whatever time it is for you right now while you're listening. Really, really let this information set in. Realize that you truly are in control of these situations and that nobody else drives you. Until next time, hopefully next Saturday, I will see you guys then. Bye bye.